So everybody starts in a straight line, and I believe the variations I usually do involve having everybody hold hands so that it forms a connection between the group members, and then they close their eyes. And from that starting point, participants are asked to either take a step forward or a step back based on their response to a set of prompts. So the prompts are proxies for racial, gender, socioeconomic privileges. So for instance, things like take one step forward if you had more than 20 books in your home growing up. Here's an example of something that most middle-class people, people who come from families with education backgrounds, take for granted, but we know that many from low socioeconomic backgrounds or from parents with less education don't have books in the home. And that puts those children at a disadvantage. Issues about if you've ever been pulled over by the police because of feeling that it's been related to the color of your skin, take a step back. And at the end of the activity, what typically happens is that at the very front of the room, you have people that, well, people that look like me.
Yeah.
People that are white, male, privileged in many ways, and haven't had those sorts of obstacles presented. So there's a real physical separation that occurs, which is often powerful for students that are participating at that point.
And it felt like, and I didn't realize it, my classmate returned to me and he said, because at the end of the exercise, all of the African American students, all of us, and we were not, this class was an evening class, so it was a traditional student, so we were probably all close to age. So I think now, as people progress, it may not be as significant, but we were probably all at the same age, so 40s, 30s and 40s. And so I was shaking, and the guy that was standing next to me, he said, "Are you okay?" He said, "Sister, are you okay?" I said, "Fine." And then I didn't realize that I was not, and I started shaking. And so Professor Frost asked us to say something, so when I opened my mouth, I was like, yeah. And so, but what it felt like, the physicality of that was parallel to how I felt in life. So you make one or two strides, as you said. I'm still finding that conflict now of, okay, I have a degree. I'm trying to integrate a predominantly white work environment. I'm trying to integrate a predominantly white neighborhood. Whatever it is. And then something happened, you feel like you're dragged 2 steps backwards. Someone says something, or you fool, or you get fooled. Whatever it is, it's a constant. It's a constant. And you don't have the opportunity not to think that you are in these environments that I'm speaking of, that you don't have the opportunity to not worry about it. There's no
And I even found that in my employment history. When it comes to, like, I've been the person with the education, I've been the person without an education. So when I was without an education, I felt like I wasn't enough. And then when I got the education, I felt like, okay, I should be enough. Now I have to go on here and be able to stand proud and be a good black woman that's, you know, strong, be able to take on this environment. But when I get in, and something happens to where it's maybe something I didn't know, maybe it's something that it's a new program being used. It's a new type of environment as far as what all that you bring when it comes to resources. And what ends up happening is you don't think you matter or that you measure up to those that are already in the environment. So it makes you feel like, well, let me step back for a minute. Maybe I don't know myself. Maybe I'm not as educated as I thought I was. But let me sit back over here for a minute and see what they do. And you shrink yourself.
You shrink. You're back to shrinking yourself. You're back to shrink. And so I felt that way, and I really couldn't articulate it. And so one of the students said something, and and then I had to apologize because it wasn't her, but it was just angry that I felt this way. And I remember when I worked in interior design, feeling that way. And I can remember being in different settings. Feeling that way, you know, and it wasn't until recently that I had an experience where I was overwhelmed it wasn't in church. And so I was invited to do a choir as I went to the rehearsal dinner, and there was two other two other men was private, so everyone else was choir, and so, and it was just kind of that little west side town. It was kind of that blackness, you know. And they had the music, and it was the historical black church, and it was just all of that environment that was just where I didn't feel any pressure. And then that evening, I met you at the ball game to see your son play. And it was very good versus Dunbar. And so everyone there was white. And I just looked at her and said, I've been around black people all day. And I think the significance of it was, that morning I had gone to Kansas. So the juxtapose of the two, that they were polar opposite experiences.
Are you saying the TEDx statement talks weren't filled with African Americans?
Not completely. Not completely filled. And I enjoyed both. I enjoyed both experiences, but that was in one day to experience the whole total polar opposites of the two experiences really gave me an understanding, put in perspective of kind of what you juggle every day.
I think your example speaks to the extremely high levels of residential segregation that we have in the Dayton community. You speak to that being you said that was on the west side.
That was on the west side.
And your listeners don't need any explanation as to what that means.
Yeah.
The fact is, I moved to Dayton 10 years ago, and right before I moved here, I was doing a little bit of research about the housing market and the city of Dayton, and I found that it was, statistically, it was the fifth most segregated city of its size in the entire country. And that has a lot of implications. Right? It means that there aren't a lot of those integrated communities. There aren't a lot of opportunities for people to get to know real live people that belong to other racial or ethnic groups or religious traditions. It means that we spend the majority of our time surrounded by other people who are like us. So I have students who come to Sinclair from some of the predominantly white suburban communities, and I say this and I mean this literally. They come to Sinclair and they have never had interactions with people of color. These are white students who have lived and been born and raised in these suburbs and have no real world experience, no way to understand the experiences of people that come from different backgrounds. So, it's easy for white people to remove themselves, to be in these predominantly white or exclusively white communities. And that has a lot of implications in terms of how we perceive the other.
Yes.
If I don't know you, what do I have to base my perception of people like you on?
Stereotypical images.
And in many cases, it goes back to that. It goes back to the images that we see in the media and those historical stereotypes that we spoke about earlier.
Yes.
That can be problematic.
Yes, absolutely. And the few minutes that we have left, 15 minutes that we have left, I want to address stigma. And we know that there's stigma that was once associated with cancer, stigma that was once associated with HIV and AIDS. And hopefully, the more we talk, as what happened with those other particular diseases that speaking, having conversations about mental health concerns will reduce stigma. And what I discovered in the research was that it's a matter of stigma in the community that will prevent, and some of it could be due to the identity, talking about being a strong woman. Could be, there's certain things maybe we don't talk about as being taboo, in the African American community. Nevertheless, the stigma of it has caused concerns, and so from what I discovered was African Americans usually think about the concerns of the impact of the family. If I do seek out assistance for my concerns, and I'm going to have that question is my health goals, my health goals, negative opinions on social studies, and so with even just a conversation of talking to people, some people may want to disclose, people may not want to disclose, but just that backlash or the repercussions that I say that I have mental health concerns, in the embarrassment, which leads to embarrassment or shame. And so those are hindrances, but they pose as problems because they hurt us. And we see data that shows African American women become incarcerated.
What you doing for Thanksgiving?
Homes.
Where are you doing for Thanksgiving?
As
Eat a
I was
lot.
before we did
Hmm?
the
You eat a lot?
Yeah.
I thought you took it like us. I think you had more.
It's just because not wanting to deal with the issue of having. So I think stigma is a big problem.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think that the stigma of seeking assistance for mental health issues is probably larger than the African American community. I think in our culture, there is still this idea, like you mentioned before, the stigma that used to be associated with cancer. Well, everybody today understands, that cancer, there are forms of cancer that are caused by choices that we make, for like lung cancer for people that smoke. But, most forms of cancer are not through behavioral, I believe, not through
Yes.
behavioral causes. So the stigma associated with that has declined over the years. You said there was less stigma around HIV/AIDS than there was, perhaps.
Before.
Perhaps, I still think there's a long way to go in
Yes,
that area.
I would agree.
But the mental health issues, you're right, we haven't been able to reduce the stigma associated with that. It's sort of like, well, just get it together.
Yes.
Figure it out. Get it together. What's wrong with you? Sign of weakness. So we holistically as a society have a long way to go. That being said, the realities of working full-time as a single parent, perhaps, particularly for women. In our country, I believe somewhere around 70% of the children born to African-American women are born to single African-American women, which puts a big burden on those women. We could do another show about where the men are, but I think that's a different conversation. And so, you try to get into a mental health professional, and you work Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. Or you miss work, you might lose your job.
We're just gonna let that rest for a minute to let everyone kind of digest that statistical data. That 70% of the children born to African American are born to single households.
Historically, yes.
Historically. And so when we consider that, because it's one thing that it said that 60% of African American women exhibit signs of mental health concerns, but only 12% actually receive treatment. And so when you start seeing these type of numbers and these type of figures, and so we say 60% are displaying mental health, and then we say 70% are single parents. That number sounds close. That's all I'm saying. That sounds like a very close number.
And then really out of the 12%, that's maybe the ones that maybe have a good job, that got the benefits to where they can afford to be able to go get treatment or go seek help.
Or possibly end up in a system that they have to have.
it's difficult to admit, in our culture, it's difficult to admit weakness. And that's true for everybody. But for women particularly, African American women even more so, the expectation of that strength is just, so the issues are compounded because women themselves are preventing themselves from seeking out the assistance. But even if African American women that are willing or interested may not have the access or the resources
To do so.
So it is leaves a very small number left that are able to seek out that sort of treatment.
We were talking yesterday, I was on Hawaii discussing in the research. There's an African American woman on the bottom of every document. And I found one that was entrepreneurship. And I said, because we had to make it work. And if you had a piece of chicken and some noodles, a can of something, you was gonna make dinner. You said, I'm gonna make something. Forget a recipe, but you were gonna make something. And so the entrepreneurship didn't surprise me that is a place where we're not so stagnant. But the bottom of every list is sometimes when you use languages is, I want us to win. But well, then there's a loser, your versus, and I'm not saying, and I want to do that, make that clear to